can actually bring that conversation to the air. There's no problem with that. We'll welcome our man Anthony Slater, the Athletic. He's with us. Unfortunately, Ant-Man's at the Chase Center covering exit interviews for the Golden State Warriors. You hate
what
to
is it?
see it.
What does he have to get a root canal? Does he have to get a cap filled?
Well,
Like that is the dental office.
Those are
That's what we call it out here, Anthony. It's a dental office.
I
It's pretty
figure
quiet. It's pretty sterile in there.
I figured this would be the event of the year for y'all.
It's not bad.
That was yesterday.
It's the Warriors sifting through the wreckage of getting their season ended by the Sacramento Kings. Like you two should be here. This would be the best event of the year for you.
We show up to the exit interviews. That'd be cold.
Ain't been to one practice all year.
That'd be cold.
Show up to the exit interviews, but bring everybody in on the cut because I think it's fascinating what you just said to Anthony.
So our guy Logan Murdoch, he did a story. I think it was just about the Warriors in general and what's next or whatever. And he said there's a quote in there where he says, some analysts believe Jonathan Kuminga could fetch more than $30 million per year on the open market, a figure that would make him the second highest player on Golden State's roster. And I was kind of unclear where his contract situation is. Did they have to, do his rookie extension this year, or can they wait a year? Should they wait a year? What does that look like?
You can wait. He's under contract for $7.6 million next year. That won't change. But he's extension eligible, just like anybody. Keegan Murray, it's the same draft. Extension or no, wait, I am wrong on that. They're a year before. Keegan Murray next summer we will be having this.
Davion was his draft.
That's Davion extension eligible. Moses Moody extension eligible. This is the year that they coming off the title, they decided to give Jordan Poole the 4 years, $123 million. Now he was still worth $3.9 million the next season, but you locked him in, eventually traded him. So they have a choice to make. That usually comes down in October, right before Halloween, if you do or don't extend. But considering how the Poole thing went, I wouldn't be surprised if they're a little bit more careful. But the truth is, he will get expensive two seasons from now. They just got to decide. Do you want to lock him in now or go to restricted free agency the following summer?
Draymond gonna swing on him.
Oh yeah, you know what time it is. Watch out in training camp, Jonathan. You know the
hands
vibes.
Up. Keep your hands up at all times, brother.
You know the vibes.
I'm not going there. I'm not going there.
You know, one of the things that I heard that might sound a little off, but I actually see the vision is, and I think it was our guy Guru. He was just breaking down like how the Warriors believe and the coaching staff and all this other stuff. You can't play Wiggins and Kuminga at the same time. Like they just do too many of the same things. It doesn't really work. And you've got to choose between one or the other. And obviously, in a perfect world, you would move on from Wiggins. But because of his contract and sometime of his spotty play or whatever, he may be tougher to move on from. And if you want to talk about improving this team, you might be able to get more if you move on from Jonathan Kuminga and still keep Wiggins around. Is that something that you've heard? Is it something that makes sense at all? Because as good as I think Kuminga is, I don't think he's going to be I don't think he's franchised. I think he's just a really good young player. And I think if they're trying to, extend that window with Steph Curry, a really good young player is not good enough. I think they're looking for a needle mover. What do you think about that thought of moving on from Kuminga, because it might fetch you more in a trade scenario?
Well, I think to a few of your points, like the Wiggins-Kuminga pairing actually worked when Draymond came back and played center. You have to go small. Kuminga has to be a small ball four, give him more space. But those lineups really worked. When you had a center next to those two, it didn't. That pairing was rough when Draymond was suspended, really. But that derailed a large part of their season anyways. I agree with your overall assessment, that Wiggins, to me, will be a salary they'll potentially look to move this summer. But Kuminga, of course, would fetch more value at $7 million next season. And you would theoretically be sending him to a team that's looking to rebuild. Obviously, he's more of a rebuilding piece. But that's what the next month's about. They have a lot of choices to make. Chris Paul's $30 million non-guaranteed that they can wipe off the books, or they can use it as a vehicle to get, another salary player from another team, or, theoretically, also Klay Thompson's future. You got to look at that too. So everything I think they will reassess and are reassessing. That's literally, the GM just talked, Mike Dunleavy just talked about that. And I think everything's up in the air, including, Kuminga could be on the table. But the one thing I will say, the guy who signs the checks here is a fan of Jonathan Kuminga, was part of the drafting of Jonathan Kuminga, and I don't think we'll just as easily be like, oh, chess piece to move elsewhere. Like, he has probably a higher future opinion than Kuminga than most people have.
Well, Anthony, is probably better than most what happens when the owner's a fan of somebody.
Let's go down the list.
What happens?
But we know that matters, right? That is like vital to organizational decision making. And yes, you guys know better than me, correct?
You will be getting contracts. They're like, wait, what? I thought we were all in agreement. We wanted him out of here, but the owner was a fan, and well,
there you are. Were you surprised by what happened Tuesday?
I mean, I'm surprised it was like a runaway. I think the Vegas line had it as like 2 or something like that. I thought it was going to be a close game. I was telling people in the lead up, I thought it was going to be low scoring. I think there was probably an outside notion from people that weren't watching the Kings on a nightly basis that they were this like, up and down team still, that it was going to be 125, 120. And it was like, this is not who they've been for 2 months, right? Mike Brown has changed who they are defensively, and the personnel has forced them to. Keon Ellis has risen, no Monk, no Herter. So I thought you were going to be looking at something that was like 105, 102 late. They always played close games. And I just thought it was going to come down to who screwed up at the end, because both teams had been screwing up at the end. But the Kings just ran away with it, and the Warriors just looked toasted, exhausted at the end of a long season. And I think that was my largest takeaway. And then spin it forward, and I'm sure you guys want to talk Kings Pelicans. Like, I want to see how that defense shows up in New Orleans.
Yeah, that's really the thing with this version of the Kings now, since not so much Monk, but since Herter's gone out and Keon has stepped into the starting lineup, they've started to get tenacious on the defensive end. And I love what I'm seeing. I got an inkling that it's part of their identity right now and will be moving forward. It's more of a Mike Brown type team, but I'm still a little reserved to be like, oh, they're fixed defensively forever now. I'm still waiting on that, but that is kind of the story of this team right now, and what's going on is the way they play on the defensive end, and particularly on the perimeter with Keon, with Keegan, with Davion off the bench, and I think with De'Aaron Fox too, what he's able to do on the defensive end. That has been one of the stories of this team in the last month or so.
I think Keon Ellis would be the starting 2 guard even if Kevin Herter hadn't got hurt. I think it was trending that way, right? You guys watched it on a nightly basis. You already felt it tilting that way. And then the other night, I'm not saying Keon Ellis is going to be an all defensive guard, but that was an all defensive guard performance. What it was, 5 steals, 3 blocks, bothered Steph Curry most of the game, was on Curry at times, was off. He had that block weak side. I think it was at the end of the third quarter. Got his floater. Like, that was like elite stuff. That was, some of the stuff Derek White's been doing, like a Marcus Smart, like big time playoff game. Like, he blew up the Warriors offense. And you have De'Aaron Fox, who for a star guard, high usage guard, is about as, disruptive. He kind of reminds me of Shea, which is interesting because that might be the first round series, right? The way Shea is very high in the league in steals despite the high usage. That's a really good like twosome to bother a team, especially when you're allowed to play as physical as you have been lately in the NBA and certainly in the playoffs. The question mark is still backside, no rim protection. Sabonis as your center limits you. But that's why Mike Brown did what he did the other night, right? He's blitzing Steph Curry, he's doubling, he's getting out, he's kind of using exotic schemes to bother an offense. Now, the Pelicans are different. What I do like about this matchup compared to the other ones is Mike Brown has a few days now knowing Zion's out. He doesn't have to game plan for Zion. He can suddenly go, hey, Keon Ellis, lock into the CJ McCollum matchup. What are ways you can take away Trey Murphy? Like, that's where he can use all of his attention. Whereas if Zion was playing, like, you can't talk much about Trey Murphy and CJ. You got to focus in on Zion. So I think if you're going to win, if the Kings are going to win Friday night, it's going to be by like kind of locking up the Pelicans, because the Pelicans can defend right back.
Mm-hmm. And the tough part about we're talking about Keon and singing his praises from the other night, and these two teams, the Warriors and the Kings, hadn't played since January 25th, and we had believed these teams were different. The Warriors were different. Certainly, the Sacramento Kings were different. The Kings and Pelicans played on April 11th. Mm-hmm. Like, they played with Keon. Like, they and the result was the same. It was the same as the other 4 games. Like, they're 0-5 now. What has to be different for it to not be 0-6 for Sacramento?
Well, I don't know, because every time I'm in the building, the Pelicans look like an NBA champion. I mean, they blew the Warriors out a bunch this season. The next night after McCollum hits 9 threes and they blow the Kings out, I came down to a big Warriors-Pelicans game, which, by the way, if the Warriors win that, they're the 8th seed, and you never even see Kings-Warriors. The Pelicans blew them out. And I'm like, this is the best team ever if I'm in the building.
So I got an idea. How about you don't get on this flight to New Orleans?
Stay here.
Why don't you stay your happy ass right there at the Chase Center?
I'm good. But
he said, I'm going to New Orleans. Stop playing with me.
Yeah, I do. I do think the fact that there's no Zion, like, he's been, even when he's not scoring a bunch, he's just like, every time you go to a pregame Kings-Pelicans game, like, that's what Mike Brown's talking about, like their scheme to stop Zion. And then suddenly it is CJ McCollum open for more threes. It's Trey Murphy bombing from 26 feet away. Like, that's just not the game plan. So can you just limit CJ McCollum's open looks? Can you keep a body on Trey Murphy? Can you try not to allow Jose Alvarado to have as much of an imprint on the game as he's had in some of them? We'll see. But some might just come down to hitting shots too, right? Does Trey Murphy just instead miss 5 of those deep threes? Does Keegan Murray get hot again? I mean, I hadn't seen him have a game like that in a long time.
Yeah, Keegan, what he did in that Warriors game, we talked about it yesterday. It was like one of those things where there have been some question marks about Keegan, and not if he's a good player or not, but like, man, we all had a lot of expectations for him. Is he going to be able to reach that, or is he just this type of player? And usually I'm not like, hey, one game just changes everything. But it felt like, at least for me, you saw a justification for everything the Kings had talked about going into the season and what they hoped, and De'Aaron working with Keegan, and like, no, he's really got this and that. In the brightest stage so far in this season, he showed up, and it was like, oh, okay, yeah, I'll give him a little more time, because I think he might have something like, maybe not 32 a night, but like that type of aggressiveness and shot making on a regular basis.
It's always a really good sign for young players when their games get better in the playoffs. And this isn't just a one-game sample for Keegan Murray. You guys remember the first-round series last year. You know, he was a little bit shell-shocked, it seemed, the first 3 games, to the point that I remember going into, I think it was game 4 in Chase, where I'm at, there was a question of, like, would Mike Brown replace him in the starting lineup? Would he have the quick hook? And then that night he played really well, and I think he played like 40 minutes. And if you look at his game log in that series, it went from like lower 30s, 20 minutes to 40 by the end of the series, which to me showed like, no, Mike Brown believes in him on the playoff stage, and he elevates his game in those type of scenarios. And we saw it again the other night. I'm not, like you said, I'm not just like saying, okay, he's definitely going to now score 32 in every playoff game, but those are always very good signs for young players, because oftentimes it goes the other way, right? You've got a lot of players in this league that do a lot in the regular season, and suddenly playoff time, more physical, different style of game, they shrink a little bit. I mean, not that y'all want to get too deep into it, but this has been a question about Domantas Sabonis really his entire career, going back to Indy. You know, what does his game do on the playoff stage? So it's good that Keegan Murray seems to be going that way.
And it felt, going back to, Tuesday, it felt deliberate. Like when you look at what Keegan did in the first half, it looked like it was deliberate and intentional. Like he's going to be aggressive. He's going to be a factor in this game. It was really, really aggressive right out the gate in the first quarter.
Yeah, like that completely flipped the game. And you could tell early that the Warriors weren't sharp, because it was like Clay would get caught on a screen, and Keegan Murray would get open for 3, and Clay and Draymond would be looking at each other like, was that you? Was that me? And I think that punched the Warriors in the mouth a little bit. And like, that's what Keegan has to be. There's no Malik Monk, no Kevin Huerter. They can still be a good team because they've gotten better defensively. Honestly, losing those 2 guys in a weird way, like, does make you better defensively, but you got to still score a certain amount of points to win an NBA game. And I think a lot of those points have to come from him, because I don't think Sabonis is suddenly going to explode for 30, right? He's going to just get his normal amount of numbers. Somebody's got to get 12 of those Monk points that are no longer there. It's pretty much got to be Keegan Murray.
Yeah, I hear you on that. Anthony Slater, one of the hardest working men in the game right now, because he's got him covering 2 teams all over the place. And I've had this discussion a couple of times, and we had it again yesterday. The future of this Kings team and what they're trying to build. It's the second year of this quote unquote program they're trying to put together, and they're being compared to, other teams who have been at this for 4, 5, 6 years, right? Like, you should be where they're at. Well, the Kings are at the beginning of what they're trying to do. And a lot of people look at if they're not able to make the playoffs as this being a failure as a season. And I would definitely say you wouldn't reach the goal for sure. There's no doubt about that. But the way that they've transformed themselves in the last month or so, with finding a guy like Keon Ellis and essentially finding your defensive guy and your two guard and transforming how this team plays, more of a defensive team in the mold of Mike Brown. Do you think you can still pull out some positives to this series, even if you don't win on Friday night, if you miss the playoffs? So there's still some things that you can say, man, we missed our goal, but we figured some things out. We learned some things about ourselves, and now we can kind of mold our franchise around what we learned in these last couple months.
Yeah, I mean, look, they won 48 games last year. They won 46 games this season. De'Aaron Fox, I think, in the Mike Brown era, has taken his game to another level. Another guy who I think shows really well in the playoffs, just like his game fits that. This season you found Ellis. I think you did miss on some of the margins, the Vazankovs, the Duartes, like some of that stuff hasn't worked. There's going to need to be some sharpening around the core. If you lose this game, you do keep your first round pick. It's kind of interesting how that goes. They have not emptied the cupboard, right? The first round pick cupboard that they have, and made a big trade, which I still think is on the table with the various salaries that they have. But yeah, I think like this franchise is in a healthier, more positive place than they've been since this isn't a revelation, but the Chris Webber, Mike Bibby era, right? I mean, like, it's 2 straight mid 40 win seasons. I think if you wanted to have a conversation or an argument about could this core ever be a true title contender, I could hear no and I could hear yes, depending on like what type of trade might be available. But okay, let's say over the next 4 or 5 seasons, the Fox Sabonis core is a mid 40s to low 50s win teams that, depending on the season and depending on how good the conference is, you're maybe up to a 3-4 seed, down to a 7-8 seed playing through the play-in. Like, I think that's a good result. I think that's great basketball in Sacramento. I think that's fun nights where you go and watch these great play-in games. And if stuff breaks right, like the Memphis Grizzlies are a great example, right? The grit and grind era. They never won a title. They never went to the finals. They got to, I think, 1, maybe 2 West finals. They had these 7-game wars. Now they're retiring Marc Gasol's number, and Zebo's a local legend, and Tony Allen, and like, that's viewed very positively locally. It made people a ton of money. It established that brand and that franchise there. And that might be what's going on with the Kings. I would guess, if you told me, do you think they're going to win a title or not over the next decade? I would probably say no. But I think they have a lot of really good, fun basketball going on there that they certainly did not have the last 15 plus years.
Stilo and Casey on KIFM with Sacramento 98.5 FM, KRXQ HD2 Sacramento, ESPN 1320, always live on the free Odyssey app. Anthony Slater at The Athletic with us. You mentioned something a minute ago about Domantas Sabonis. He's probably not going to explode and give you 30. Why?
Drop and give you 50.
Huh?
Said drop and give you 50.
Well, that too, but like,
why is he not? He doesn't.
Yeah,
shoot.
like
doesn't shoot. Doesn't shoot the jumper.
He's just not aggressive enough. He doesn't play outside. My thing is always, I mean, he doesn't play outside of his game. Like, he's never gonna, like, guys who get to 30, 40, 50, things like that, like they'll force some shots. They'll feel something. It feels like Domas is never gonna do that.
To Damian, we
feel
like he was aggressive on Tuesday and he shot 14 times.
Right.
Yeah. I mean, you're never gonna see a Domantas Sabonis heat check.
Right.
Which that's his game, it's outside of him to like shoot 3 straight threes or something like that. And that's where I think Jokic over the last handful of seasons changed. And if you give him the 3, if you just go into a game saying, we're taking this way, Nikola Jokic, you can take every 3 you want from the top of the key. He now will. He didn't used to. Or mid-range or whatever. Like, and there are times I've seen it with the Warriors, they like to make Jokic a scorer instead of a passer, which they really like to do to Sabonis too, right? They want to make Sabonis have to beat him as a scorer. Jokic now will. He will score 35 to 40. that's a change in his game, and maybe where he's just like a better player than Sabonis in a sense. He can be more of that scorer. I just don't think Sabonis trusts, like, okay, if you want to give me 5 straight mid-rangers or this or that, I'm going to keep taking them. Like, that's just it's either not in his ethos or he just doesn't believe he's going to make some of them because he's not going to do it. When's the last time he shot 20 times in a game?
He hasn't done it very often. Like, we looked it up a couple. It's I think it was like 3 times or 4 times. Like, he has not done that very often at all.
Which, by the way, scorers love to play with that, right? Like Malik Monk's like, yeah, just fine. Like max center, shoot 11 times because then I'm getting 8 more of those shots. And like Keegan Murray and Barnes now should shoot more. I think it's just how they're built and how Sabonis is. It is the other guys that got a bulk score. Sabonis is just not going to be suddenly a 26 point per game guy.
Yeah, in the West Sac League, I like playing with my guy Ted because all he does is set screens for me. Yeah, that's my guy.
DHOs, screens, rebounds, kickouts.
In any league because it just set screens. Let me get my shots up, big dog. So yeah,
3 times, by the way, is the number of times Domas shot 20 or more.
I was gonna say 2.
It's 3
with the Kings or in his career or this season.
This season is
okay, yeah. That's
so Ant-Man. What you thinking about tomorrow, man? I think the Kings, even regardless of Zion being out or whatever, I think they got a good shot. I one of the things that I kept saying was I didn't think they were playing bad basketball towards the end of the season per se. They couldn't get over the hump. They'd play good, they'd get these leads, then they give up the leads, and when it got late, they weren't able to do it. That didn't equate to bad basketball. That equated to not being able to find a way to turn that good ball that you're playing into wins. They got the win on Tuesday, maybe a little bit of a confidence boost. I think they got a really, really good shot. Even before Zion was out, I thought they had a good shot of going into New Orleans and getting this win. But what do you see with everything in play now?
Yeah, I think they're going to defend well. I think they're going to have a good scheme. The fact that they got, I think, an extra day because of how the schedule had to break with the play-ins, I think that helps them. I think it's going to really come down to De'Aaron Fox scoring, particularly in the second half and the fourth quarter. He's going to need to bring them home, I think, because I think points are going to be at more of a premium than most NBA games. And it might just be him having to break Herb Jones down and score. And, we're talking about an all defensive guy against basically an all NBA offensive type score. And Herb Jones has given him problems in the past, that length. Alvarado's going to be out there doing pest stuff. I'm very curious about Willie Green's rotation choices now that Brandon Ingram's back. Brandon Ingram got benched, by the way, late in that play-in game. And even when Zion Williamson got hurt, he didn't go to Brandon Ingram. He went to McCollum, who had also got benched because he was having a bad game. But
real quick about that, I saw the same thing. I was in the arena, so I couldn't really tell. Was that a minutes restriction thing, or was that a
coach's decision? Yeah. So Ingram had missed 12 games, something like that. He had a pretty bad knee bruise, and he came back in that final Lakers game on the last day of the regular season, and he played 20-something minutes. He slowed down their offense, and he was not good defensively. And remember, you remember when the Pelicans were in Golden 1, they just had all those athletes flying around. Dyson Daniels was in there, causing steals. Alvarado. Ingram, I think, really affected them, and it is hard to reacclimate high usage stars who don't necessarily play that great a defense. It's what Minnesota's dealing with Towns right now. So going into that second Lakers game, there was a thought going in like, man, if Brandon Ingram doesn't look good again, he might pull the plug on Brandon Ingram, and he did. It was a complete coach's decision, and I'm curious going into tomorrow what Willie Green does. Does he go small, right? Valanciunas, how many minutes does Valanciunas get? And then, what he does with Ingram, because I think maybe the best way to beat this Kings team is to just envelope them in size and try to limit their offense.
Anthony, we appreciate you, man. We know you're absolutely swamped today, man. Appreciate you making time for us before you head to New Orleans. Leave all that bad juju you bring to the arena. Leave that stuff at Chase.
Yeah, leave it at Chase.
We don't need the all-world Pelicans tomorrow night.
You might get them. All right, don't blame me if you do.
No, we will. You'd be public enemy number one.
All right, well, what? I won't feel as bad because I'll no longer be covering the Kings playoff run that I'm going to cover until it ends. But, if the Pelicans end it. But I'll be in Oklahoma City if the Kings are there. That would be I don't want to get y'all too hyped, but that'd be a fun series.
Oh, it would be. No, we already there. We're already hyped.
Wait,
don't worry.
Are they going to welcome you back to Oklahoma City?
That's right. That's
yes,
right.
Of course.
Does OKC got beef with Anthony Slater?
they used to call me Trader Slater, but
Oh,
that was when Durant left, and I left when Durant left. Now I've gone back about 4 times this year. I've written a few stories. I'm welcome back. I think that some of those feelings, and not just towards me, towards Kevin Durant, have softened. Okay, it's a different era. There's no longer the Russell Westbrook era. It is a new era, and they like coverage there, right? They're on the rise.
Real
they
quick,
definitely are.
in like 20 seconds with that, with everything you just said, KD gets his number retired there, right?
Eventually, yes. He'll need to be retired. That'll be an emotional day. How about this? I'll leave you with this. How about Kevin Durant in his later stage career doing a welcome home mid-level? I'll come off the bench as a 39-year-old for the ascending Oklahoma City Thunder and maybe win a title in Bricktown and career comes full circle. That's something that, I'm not saying it's going to happen, but man, what a storybook that would be.
To play LeBron and Bronny when they're with the Kings, OKC versus the Kings.
Well, let's bring Zero back too. If we're winning
bring
rings,
everybody.
If we're winning
Harden,
rings,
Serge Ibaka somewhere.
Whoa. You went a little too far with James.
Sorry.
Let's just get Russ back and make sure Russ gets a ring.
Oh, is this like Space Jam 4? Did we just make like a script here? What's going on?
Down.
Thunderstruck. You remember Thunderstruck, the movie with Kevin Durant?
Oof, not my bag.
No. That didn't hit quite as good as a Space Jam.
Wow. Yeah, that is. Oh, that's a deep cut right there. That actually took a second. That's a deep cut right there. We appreciate you, Anthony. Safe travels, brother.
All right, y'all.